Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Becoming Counsel. Today, we're going to look at an essay fact pattern that will touch on agency, and specifically when one person's actions legally bind someone else to their. So let's get started. So let's start with a perfume company. Let's just call it Fancy Perfumes. It was founded 150 years ago, and its whole reputation rests on one signature perfume made from a secret formula that the company guards obsessively. Now, the demand for this scent has softened in recent years, so Fancy Perfumes has decided to expand into other product lines. Think of things like scented candles, home diffusers, things like that. Stuff that won't cannibalize their flagship product, but something that they could potentially build based on their current infrastructure. Now, Fancy Perfumes doesn't have much experience outside its one product, so it hires a consultant. Let's call him John. In the contract between Fancy Perfumes and John, it says two critical things that matter here. First, it says John will spend 6 months traveling to some of their competitors, and he is authorized to buy the formula of any home fragrance products he thinks Fancy Perfumes could produce successfully. But they do put some conditions here. They've done some market research and they learned that formulas in this space typically sell somewhere between $8,000 and $15,000, and they've put a cap on John to not enter into any agreement for more than $12,000 for any one singular formula. The second caveat in the contract is that Fancy Perfumes does not want to buy something materially similar to their current product. So it's decided to share its own secret formula with John on the condition that he doesn't share with anyone else, specifically so he doesn't accidentally buy something too similar to their product. Now, at the next big annual expo, think of something that is basically attended by everybody in the industry. Fancy Perfume CEO gets up and announces this effort. He says something like, Fancy Perfumes is now breaking new ground. We've hired a consultant, John, and he'll be entering into contracts to buy formulas from other suppliers on our behalf. In that statement, he does not say anything about the $12,000 cap or any other terms within the contract with John. Now, over the next few months, John, acting on the behalf of Fancy Perfumes, enters into 4 deals. Number 1 was for a home diffuser formula for $9,000. Number 2 for a candle formula for $14,000. Number 3, another candle formula, but not for cash. John basically agrees to trade them the copy of Fancy Perfume's secret signature formula for that other candle formula. And then finally, John enters into a contract for $12,000 for a piece of equipment. Now, the question here is which one of these deals are Fancy Perfumes legally bound to? So before we dive into that analysis, I just want to mention the rules that we have to kind of keep in mind here. So first off is the agency relationship. Agency is a fiduciary relationship where an agent acts on a principal's behalf and is subject to the principal's control. And the headline consequence here is an agent can bind a principal to a contract if the agent acts within the scope of his or her authority. Once that happens, the principal is liable to the contract terms. So this entire analysis reduces to one question repeated 4 times. Did John have the authority for that specific deal? And so there's 2 flavors of authority to check. Number 1 is actual authority. This is the actual authority an agent reasonably believes he has based on the principals dealing with him. So think of it like as either express authority, so you can do X, Y, Z, or implied authority, which basically can kind of fill any gaps, right? What an agent can reasonably infer he needs to do to carry out the express conditions in his or her contract. Now, the other option of authority outside of the actual authority is apparent authority. This is kind of like a sneaky one. It's where like essentially a third party reasonably believes the agent has authority, and that belief is traceable to the principal's conduct. So essentially, the magic phrase here is holding out. So when the CEO made that announcement, for example, he was holding out that John was their agent. Now, the principal holds the agent out as having authority. A third party reasonably relies on that, and boom, the principal is now bound, even if the agent secretly violated their actual instructions. So now that you have that kind of high level breakdown of agency, actual authority, implied authority, and then apparent authority, let's dive into each one of those questions. So let's start with the first one. So that we're going to do the IRAC format. So issue one, did John have actual authority to buy the home diffuser formula for $9,000? So rule one is actual express authority, authority spelled out by the principal to the agent. So let's look at the analysis here. Fancy Perfume has a written contract with John that expressly authorized John to buy home fragrance formulas he thought the company can produce successfully. A diffuser formula is squarely in that home fragrance product area. The price $9,000 is under the $12,000 cap. So he's inside the subject matter and the money limit outlined in the contract. This is actual express authority, clean and simple. From a conclusion perspective, Fancy Perfumes is likely bound to this contract. Let's look at the second one. So issue number two is Fancy Perfumes bound to the $14,000 candle formula? Well, let's look at actual authority. Does it exist, right? We've mentioned the rule above. John does have the ability to go buy this type of item, but the cap was $12,000. He agreed to $14,000. So he went beyond the express instruction, and so he has no actual authority for the deal. So let's look at apparent authority. So that's the real question here. So apparent authority doesn't care what John's private instructions were, it cares what Fancy Perfumes communicated to the world. So essentially, did the principal hold the agent out? Yes, they told everybody that John was their consultant and they could enter into contracts to buy formulas on the company's behalf. Number two, was there any cap or any other terms disclosed? No, there was no mention of that $12,000 ceiling. And then, was the seller kind of reliance on it reasonable? Well, let's look at this, right? The going rate for these formulas is between $8,000 and $15,000. So the price tag of $14,000 for this candle sits into that normal band. And so there's nothing for the seller to think that John doesn't have the authority or that $14,000 must be above the limit, must be unreasonable. Therefore, there is apparent authority here and it is satisfied. So in conclusion for this item, even though John does not have actual authority, Fancy Perfumes would still be bound to this contract due to apparent authority. So now let's look at number three. The deal where he tried to trade away the secret formula to get another candle formula. So issue three is, did John have actual or apparent authority for swapping Fancy Perfume's secret signature formula for that other formula? In terms of actual authority, no. His contract explicitly required him to keep this formula secret from everyone. Handing a copy to someone else is the exact opposite of what he was told to do, and there is no actual authority here. So let's look at apparent authority. And it's also no, but there's a nuance here. So yes, Fancy Perfumes did hold John out as an agent generally, but apparent authority doesn't rescue this deal like it did in the previous one. Because in the previous one, the price point was in a reasonable range. Here, that seller is in the industry and they know that Fancy Perfumes has built a company for 150 years off of this singular secret formula. Everyone in the industry knows that. And so if an agent walks in and offers to trade that very formula away, any reasonable perfumer or person within the industry should go and be like, that doesn't sound like a reasonable deal, and that doesn't sound like something that that company would be willing to give up. And so in conclusion for this one, you would conclude that Fancy Perfumes was not bound by this deal. And essentially holding John out gets overcome by the third party's notice that this particular act was way out of any plausible authority that they would have given to John. All right, so let's look at the last deal, that $12,000 deal for equipment. So issue number 4 is, did John have actual or apparent authority to buy that piece of equipment? In terms of actual authority, no. His contract was only to buy formulas, nothing else. Apparent authority, let's look into that. So even though there was a holding out of John, it was specific about buying recipes. Buying formulas. And the holding out was specifically about that. And so even though John is working as an agent, that company should have known that the agent was formula related, not equipment related. In conclusion, there's no actual authority, and because John was operating outside of his area, there's no apparent authority because the third party should have known equipment does not equate to formulas. And as such, the perfume company, Fancy Perfumes, would not be bound to that equipment contract. So let's do a quick kind of like wrap up of the key takeaways. So deal 1, that home diffuser for $9K, it's bound because of actual express authority. It's in the subject matter that's allowed under the cap. Deal number 2, the candle for $14,000, the company would be bound to that agreement because even though it was not actual authority, it was apparent authority because the principal held the agent out. It never disclosed a limit, and the price was within a normal market range. For number 3, the swap of the sequent formula, the company's not bound to that. There's no actual authority, and apparent authority fails because the third party was on notice that the act was just so outrageous and wouldn't have been reasonable. Deal number 4, which was for the $12,000 for the equipment, the company would not be bound. There was no actual authority because it's a wrong subject matter, and there's no apparent authority as well because the public holding out was limited to buying formulas. So that's kind of it for this example. I hope it was helpful. Best of luck as you prep for your finals, and thank you.